Hey everyone, welcome to Trucking Sustainably. I'm your host, Jason Morgan. Thanks for joining us. Great show today. We are talking charging infrastructure. And it's not just one show. It's two shows. This is such a big topic. One show couldn't contain it. We have two parts. Let's start with the first here. We're going to talk turnkey solutions. So there's lots of pieces, lots of players, lots of new things, right? How do we get our arms around this? Now, we often talk about this at a very high level, but we're going to get into some nitty-gritty details because we're going to connect with Chris Roback, Vice President of Sales and Customer Experience at Volvo Financial Services, and Derik Wilson, Infrastructure and Charging Manager at Volvo Trucks North America, to dive into some use cases and really get our arms around what it takes to bring charging infrastructure to fleets that want to put EVs on the road. So here we go. Hey, all right, so Chris, Derik, thank you guys so much for joining us here today. Excited to learn more about how the infrastructure for EVs really rolls out. So let's start there. Derik, we'll start with you here. EV development, right? It requires a lot of partners, a lot of planning to get the infrastructure in the ground, get the trucks where they need to be. How does this all work? Can you give us a quick overview?
So it's really a team effort from, Volvo Trucks, our dealer, the fleet, our customer, the utility, and our turnkey provider. So bringing them all together, making sure that the timing and alignment are all in sync. So we really go through a process to qualify the fleet. So we do the route analysis, we do site assessment, and then we do a load assessment with all providers. This really sets expectations and help us strategize on the electrification plan.
Right, Chris, what about the financial side, right? This is a little bit of a different financial game from the diesel-powered world. Any thoughts there on the front end of the financial, what people need to know?
Sure. We concentrate on how to make it more simple for our fleets to make this transition from diesel to battery electric. We have several programs that we offer to support our fleets moving into a more sustainable fleet. And that really revolves around bundling of our services. And what I mean by bundling of our services, it's funding of the truck, funding of the infrastructure, making sure that we bundle services such as maintenance agreements within the finance instrument. We have the capability to roll physical damage insurance into our products and services. So we kind of combine a total solution that will just make it easier on our customers to not have to think about those things. We handle it for you, and you just concentrate on operating the truck and taking care of your customers.
Okay, yeah, because there's a lot going on there, and to your point, bringing it all together, right? Having one point of contact over at my OEM partner. I know you have Volvo Turnkey Solutions there that can enable that. But again, there's still more people involved in this process than there has been in the past, right? We have utility, working with the utilities to get the energy to where I need it to be from the fleet point of view. We have infrastructure development partners and construction partners and everything to get the lines in the ground and get the chargers in the ground there. And then charging, and even after that's all in there, charging management, right? That's a whole different thing than fueling on diesel. If I'm the fleet, what is my role in these relationships? Surely I've picked my OEM, I partnered there, I'm using your services, but then what's my role in utility development or working with my utilities or growing that relationship? How does that side work, and what's on me?
So typically, we have relationships with the utilities, and so do our turnkey providers. However, the fleet needs to be the one typically or generally to submit an application for a new service. It's very rare that, the building has available power for a certain amount of trucks. So generally they need to bring in a new service. They don't always own the land. So the utilities are typically looking for land ownership or a long-term lease. But what we've seen so far is that, typically the real estate owners are open to extending leases, or they are open to installing infrastructure as it adds value to their property.
And if I may add to that, Derik, with respect to Volvo Financial Services, when we're considering the funding of charging and infrastructure, that also comes into play. So whether the property is held by a landlord or the fleet themselves does come into consideration. So the terms of our finance agreements have to match the terms of the lease. In particular, if the fleet owns the property, it's a little more simplified.
Right. I see. I see there, and you know what I get from this too is yes, there are a lot of different processes. It's a little more involved, right, from the fleet point of view. But making sure I have those relationships, right? If it's a landlord situation that I know the landlord, I'm talking with them on the front end, making sure this is all good before I go down this path for sure, right? That's a fun new wrinkle that even I wasn't aware of there. Getting to know the utility, they're going to be my fuel supplier, right? In a big way. So making sure I have a relationship there, that onus is still on me. Maybe I'll figure out who my utility rep is, take that guy out to lunch, right? Build that relationship. We know trucking is really built on relationships there. The Volvo team has done a good number of these deployments already. You have electric trucks with the electric VNR out there rolling on the road in applications. Can you give me an example or a case study of how the whole Volvo Turnkey Solutions program has facilitated the transition here toward electromobility?
So it really enables them to hit that easy button, I guess you could say. We streamline the process. We spec the chargers, and we project manage throughout the whole cycle. It's a really long sales cycle now, so we handhold through it all. And then, like I said, it's a team effort, so we really collectively make sure that everyone aligns. To give you an example, we have a customer who purchased 100 VNREs, and it's a phased approach. So we're rolling these out in 9 different locations. It's one big project ultimately in 9 different locations. And it's with our turnkey provider in charge. They're deploying Terra 184 chargers in these different sites. And we're just over the halfway mark now. So making progress there. And then we also have another turnkey provider, Gilbarco. And we have a customer that they are working with that ordered 14 VNREs, and they're utilizing 2 different charging capabilities. So they have a rapid charger where they can charge up to 250 kilowatts at once through a split system. And then they also have 184 kilowatt chargers as well. We're going to be breaking ground there soon. We just got the easement signed, so looking forward to getting that project done too.
Perfect. Chris, on the financial side, I know we really don't want to talk specific numbers, but just kind of how you've helped maybe customers through that financial process and maybe any challenges, again, just kind of a high level, how you've helped them work through those.
Sure, Jason. Really, it starts with the fleet and the dealer working together. The earlier they get started on the discussion and involving all of the people from the Volvo side of the equation, the better. So my recommendation is get started early, bring Volvo Financial Services in immediately into the discussion. And then our expertise is we'll help you make that transition to this new technology. And the way we do that is there are differences between battery electric and diesel, for example. And first and foremost is charging and infrastructure that Derik spoke about. And then another area are government incentives. So you have to start thinking through how is that going to fit into our equation. And then lastly, how am I going to service this new technology, right? New drivetrain, battery electric technology. And we at Volvo Financial Services can work with the fleet, we'll work with the dealers, we'll work with people like Derik and others within the Volvo group to come up with a financing solution or a funding solution that covers the entire ecosystem. So how are you going to fund the truck? We can wrap the incentives into the cap cost of that truck. We can do an operating lease, for example, and take the back end risk of the collateral off of the fleet. We can bundle the gold service agreement within the operating lease. And then at the end of that lease, the customer will have options to extend it. They can purchase it for fair market value or turn it into the Volvo group with certain turn-in conditions. So we just try to take the complexity out of the process, especially as it comes to how are we going to pay for all this?
Right. Yeah. Always an important question too, and a little different in the e-mobility world. I'm going to go back to one thing. Well, first, Chris, there you mentioned the dealer, right? The dealer. So if I'm a fleet, the dealer is still a point of contact for me. This isn't a brand new scheme. I can start working with the dealer. They can bring you guys in with your teams to help figure that out. Derik, you had mentioned a couple of your turnkey solutions partners, right? InCharge was one of them that caught me there. How does that work? Like, what do those partners? How do those partners interact with the fleet? How they interact with you? Can you give me a little detail more about how that all works with these turnkey partnerships?
Yeah, so we have a process. Typically, we get together with the fleet and we go through a discovery call, essentially. We learn things like what grants are available, how many trucks are they ordering? Do they own or lease the land? And that really puts things in perspective for us. Being that we have more than one provider, sometimes the dealer is able to choose which one they prefer to work with or they work with better. So we really make that introduction. And then once the dealer, or once we go through the process of the route analysis and we spec a charger, now the dealer is able to place the order for those chargers, and then the turnkey provider is actually able to roll that up or into a final package or work with VFS and include that into a final package for the customer as well.
I see. Then just to confirm, then on that side, on the financial side, that can be all part of my bundle. So I still just have one point of contact there. I'm working with Volvo Financial Services then in that case, and that's bringing all that together. So I'm not invoiced over here and invoiced over there. It's just we can streamline that. Very good, Chris. You had touched on this a little bit too, but these variables that impact ROI. I mean, you mentioned how are we going to pay for all this? That's always a great question. The next question that often comes after that is, well, when am I going to see my ROI, right? Fleets run a business. The margins are slim. We want to see some return on this. Now, this is a completely different world. Timetables are a little different, right? Investment structure is a little different there. But what variables come into play that people should be aware of compared to what they already know in the diesel world?
Yeah, really the two main variables to consider would be fuel and maintenance. So when you look at those two components, they're quite different from the diesel, right? You have electricity versus the cost of diesel, which is usually pretty favorable, especially based upon usage and over time, okay? And the maintenance is something that comes into play. And as I said before, the Volvo Group offers our gold service agreement, which covers those aspects of the truck so that the fleet does not have to be concerned with how do I service this new technology? How do I handle the batteries? The true answer to ROI is it depends. I hate to say that, but there are variables that you really need to consider, such as the level of incentives. Maybe on the cost of electricity side, you're looking at low carbon fuel standard credits, which are generally available only on the West Coast, but maybe moving to other states as well. So there's a lot of components, and financing is one of them. So can I spread out the cost over time? Typically, we would offer, let's say, a 5 or 6 year lease or loan, and that could go into a variable for ROI as well.
If I could add to that, yeah, typically battery electric vehicles are a lot lower maintenance, which leads to increased uptime. So that impacts their revenue. And then essentially fuel costs, as Chris said, utilizing energy as a fuel, you have a fixed price per kilowatt. So you can forecast what your fuel consumption is going to be for the month based on your routes, right? And typically what we're seeing, the more the trucks utilize, the better savings. And then to add, in some states, they do have LCFS. So typically those help offset the fleet's overhead as well.
Right, right. No, and your point's well taken. I mean, in any fleet application, even in the diesel world, the answer to the ROI question is it depends. I mean, it depends on how efficiently you're running, depends on what you're running. I mean, there's lots of different variables there too. I think the grants, the funding, the credits, I mean, those are all those things that are a little bit different from the diesel world that we don't have a lot of experience with that can impact that return on investment. But Chris, this is any big financial purchase comes with there's a lot of emotion there as well, I mean, I'm not running electric trucks, but as a man who has signed a mortgage as well, I know what it's like to see the dotted line, and you gotta sign on it eventually, right? You gotta take the leap. How have you seen, the turnkey solutions, bringing all this together? How is that impacting your relationships with customers and how you work through, you mentioned the kind of different sales cycle or even just consulting cycle. How is this changing relationships?
It really is moving more into a consultative relationship, Jason. This is an area where we're all learning as we go along with this new technology. So we want to just team up with our fleets, our dealers, and the rest of the Volvo group just to help simplify I wouldn't say it's more complex, but because it's new, it's complex to everyone. Okay. So I really think that what you said is true. Trying to simplify it, put all these costs onto one invoice, okay, make it easier on the fleet to take all of these different components like insurance or like a gold service agreement and bundle them with the financing. And you have the phrase we use, one-stop shop. Make it simple, make it easy on the fleet to make this decision to transition to battery electric.
Right. Derik, any other thoughts?
Yeah, so typically it's a longer sales cycle than traditional ICE trucks, So we're with them from A to Z through the handover process. And, it's kind of a big deal when we do these handovers now. There's generally ribbon cutting ceremonies. We have state government agencies, air districts, fleets, dealers, everyone there. So it's really a huge accomplishment when we could all, come together and see our efforts, the fruit of our efforts.
Right, for sure. Well, I appreciate you two coming together with me to help me understand this and work through this. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, great conversation there. Learned a lot. The financial aspect, right? It's something we don't talk a lot about in detail, but having Chris's take on how that works and how he works with the customers is great. Derik giving us that overview for how the process works. Really great insight there. But remember, this is just part one. We got part two. Stay tuned for the next episode where we're going to dive into charging as a service. It's a fun buzzword. What does it mean? We'll find out. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Trucking Sustainably. We'll see you next time.